it was this whole classic idea of like, oh, Africa is just like the white man's burden, and we will have to deal with Africa or something, or some of these more lower income countries, and we have to save them.
Who did God leave you in charge of Earth? That don't even make sense.
I would like to address the misconception that the global south doesn't want vaccines. We never said we don't want vaccines. We have highlighted in this episode that COVAX was the initial incentive, but we have seen that it clearly is a disparity. And most of the time when vaccines are being given to us, they're leftovers. Hello, Globies. Welcome to the World Health Investigation Podcast. My name is Jocelyn.
I'm Edna.
And I'm Loza.
We're three young global health professionals and your hosts for the World Health Investigation Podcast.
Also known as the WHI, and we will be discussing all things global health and unpacking the most controversial social and health issues,
as well as promoting new age global health development and equity.
So, ladies, what is the tea in global health today?
Ladies. COVAX. Y'all ever heard of COVAX? Vaccines, equity.
Vaccine.
Equity.
Or equity in health. What
equity
we promote.
in health. Yeah.
What we value.
Equity.
What we
That's our brand, right?
I'm familiar with that.
Yeah.
You talking about COVAX?
That's our case study. That one, yeah.
For our fellow Globies, can you tell us what COVAX is?
Yeah.
Yes, of course. Let me unpack because it's not every day everybody knows COVAX. But basically, COVAX is this kind of initiative that was launched in April 2020. Remember 2020 when the Panasomic started?
Yeah.
Yeah. So then these people, they said, oh, this pandemic is...
Yeah, go on.
Oh, Lord. This parasinosis is going to follow us.
Okay, please.
What even is a pandemic anymore? But yes, so when this paranormal activity, it was getting serious. And they noticed. They said, okay, let's have a little meeting to discuss like how are we globally gonna respond to this pandemic. So Gavi, y'all know Gavi, they be working with vaccines.
Vaccine Alliance.
There we go, Global Vaccine Coalition Alliance. Them.
Our favorite.
The World Health Organization, WHO, the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness and Innovation, and the access to COVID-19 tools. They all just came together and they said, let us come up with an initiative so that we can ensure that diagnostics for COVID, therapeutics for COVID, and vaccines for COVID will be spread out equitably in the world. Beautiful.
It's amazing.
That was the best idea. I mean, that's our brand. I mean, we should love that. And that was their goal. And so the COVAX was going to be a platform that supported research and development for basically the manufacturing of these therapeutics, vaccines, diagnostic tools, and then they would enable the negotiation of prices so that, both high-income countries and low-income countries can have access to the resulting, tools and vaccines without, the rich countries just getting everything and the rest of the world being forgotten.
Yeah.
And so it was all great. And, they had outlined a little phase system where vaccines will be allocated to countries proportionally based on their population size. So then every participating country will receive 20% vaccines for 20% of their population. And then after that, they would see what countries more at risk and distribute vaccines. It was all great, beautiful idea. Yeah.
Excellent.
But then what happened in real life? What do you guys think happened in real life? What do we see right now? Did it work out? Did all the countries get 20% and now everyone has a vaccine?
People are talking about third doses, fourth doses, when some countries don't even have one.
Exactly. To me, it's already giving, where would these extra vaccines that they'd be so kind to give out come from with the way they are struggling to, even with the way they were struggling to get hold of their own vaccines.
Exactly. So, I mean, from like my personal perspective, so now me, I'm living in the so-called high income, the global north country.
Yeah.
I have 3 doses of the vaccine. I am 23. Now, my grandparents in their 80s that happen to be living in Ethiopia have not even seen one vaccine. It has not even been offered to them, you know? So these high-risk people in so many countries, they haven't seen it. And then, you know, here's us on our 20th dose. And so the current figures, and so that's the problem. So then the current figures, at the time I researched this, it showed that 3% of people in low-income countries were fully vaccinated. 3.
I saw that. Oh my, that shocked me.
3.
Remember when I said of the people in, yeah, exactly, in the low-income countries, 3%. Is that even enough coverage to do anything?
In the whole low income countries, that includes all the country. What?
Yeah, like literally the majority of the world, basically.
The majority of the world.
Whereas, you know, the rest of the world, the Europes and the Americas, you know who you are, had around, at the time, 60% of their population vaccinated. Now it's even more. And the reason why it's not even like everybody is because of the Liberté people that don't want to take the vaccine. It's not because of scarcity, basically. Yeah. And COVAX itself, you know, in the end, they ended up contributing like less than 5% of all the vaccines that were administered globally. So they announced, you know, by the end of 2021, they announced they were missing their target. It ended up being basically a platform for them to just be begging rich countries, like, please, you have leftover vaccines, donate it, instead of it being a platform to negotiate and to basically ensure that these vaccines are distributed equitably. So now we are Africans, right? Well, some people claim Swiss.
Why did you have to do that?
Sorry.
Why did you have to do that?
I don't know. I just remember,
as
like,
I said,
just in the
and as the listeners will attest, as you see, I'm being bullied here. You will never take away my Zimbabweanness. Okay, I shall forever be Zimbabwean. Okay, thank you.
I did not take it away from you.
So yes, I am African.
Take it away from. Only you can take it away from yourself.
Relax, y'all. I really am.
Okay, well, she's by Rachel.
Yes, please.
So okay, so coming from these like so-called low-income countries, how does that make you feel? Like, what do you think? Where did we go wrong? What happened?
For me, it sounds like you know how let me pick my words very carefully. You know how a lot of international organizations like setting big targets and never achieving them. That by 2030 we'll do this and that, we'll end AIDS, we'll end this, but we're approaching and it's not happening. It gives me that same energy. Yeah. It gives me the energy, the vibe of, okay, they were so-called naively ambitious.
Yes.
And things happened to go wrong. So they couldn't hit their targets. When in reality, the priorities were not on check from the beginning. Like I think with COVAX in particular, was it not like a lot of the rich countries didn't want to have an agreement with waiving intellectual property rights for vaccine.
We're gonna get into it.
And so a lot of them didn't want to do. They don't want. I don't think they really want low-income countries to be what do you call it? Health equitably and free.
Exactly, like able to determine their own health.
Yeah, there's a word I'm looking for, but I don't think they really want to see, they want to have the upper hand, and they want, almost like a lot of nations want their country to be first. They want to say, oh, we have the best healthcare system, we have the best public health system, we have acted the fastest, we've done this, we've done that, we have vaccine, we have coverage, we have high vaccine coverage. But then it's like, if the low income countries do not have high vaccine coverage, I'm sorry, if the variants will pass through, even if it passes through the low income countries, it will race towards you. It will come back to you. And even your economy is gonna go back, and you're gonna go through inflation just like all of us.
Absolutely.
Like all of us. So and I remember seeing, I remember reading a study showing that actually, compared to low income countries and high income countries, the comparison was that around 3 million doses, single doses, were delivered in low-income countries in comparison to 4 billion doses in high-income countries.
It don't even make sense.
That disparity.
That's a huge disparity.
And it's, for me, it's like for countries that claim to, want equity, and, they participate in the sustainable development goals, talking about we want health for all.
Yeah.
When it comes to action, they're like, just kidding. We were not being serious.
Yeah, at the same time, that's why I also asked, like, in this whole COVAX, as they were coming up with what was needed and all these different things, did they also consult all the different countries in terms of, like, what are your actual needs right now in terms of COVID? Or like, what are your needs? In fact, what if these countries were like, for us, we don't think the vaccines are necessarily the best way. Give us more of the drug
diagnostic
solutions.
tools, yeah.
Or give us more of the diagnostic tools. Or perhaps, help us in the manufacturing side of things. Potentially.
Exactly. And this is where it goes. Like, so it goes into this kind of like where global health somehow always ends up coming back to a neo-colonial structure where there's like the global north countries that basically determine the direction health is going to go. They will say this is based on our kind of like what we want it to be. And you guys can have our leftovers if you want.
Exactly.
And so, and it's led into what has been referred to as, vaccine nationalism, vaccine apartheid. But yes, it's obvious countries will have self-interest. Yes, every country wants their people to benefit first. But then there are structures in global health that exist that continue to promote this and create like an equitable environment. And we've seen it so much with this vaccine, but it's the same with many other treatments and tools that exist in the world. And so, like, in terms of concreteness, what actually happened, so after so that they all, the countries met up and they agreed. They said, yes, COVAX, great, beautiful vision. And then, but then the moment the vaccine started to be announced, the moment Pfizer said, I have vaccine that works 95%, America was running. They said, we want 20 billion doses, please. China was running. They said, I want 1 million, and then countries were scrambling to get the vaccines, secure them for their population. And so what happened? The other countries were forgotten. COVAX forgotten. And of course, pharmaceuticals are profit-driven. You all know how I feel about the profit-driven health. But they said, fantastic, we're going to be rich. So they're making unilateral agreements. Fine. I mean, Donald Trump at the time, he didn't even want to join COVAX. It was under the Biden. He said, I want no parts in it to begin with. And so because of this unilateral agreements, vaccine scarcity was created. And you guys mentioned this, I like this, is okay, fine. If there aren't any, enough vaccines, these countries don't want to rely on aid. Let us make our own vaccines, they said. Guess what happened? Like, what?
They said, sure, here you go. Just do it. Here's the recipe.
They said, go ahead. Share it.
No problem.
No, that's not what happened.
I
wish in an ideal world, but no, patents, well, intellectual property, what a concept. It encourages science, sure. But what happened was there were like many moments where these countries, organizations, companies were hinting at like, we're not sharing this. I don't care if this is a public health emergency. I don't care if we're all in this pandemic together. So we're not sharing the recipes. And there were like different instances. So the WHO first, had a call to action for like global cooperation in this pandemic. Like, please, let's work together. And so they said, and one of them was to, waiver like intellectual properties. The pharmaceutical companies had a meeting at the same time and they said, yeah, we're not going to do that. And guess who was in attendance? Mr. William Gates, the one that is also involved in COVID. Anyways, so even the people involved in global health are against waiving intellectual properties. And then South Africa and India in 2020 in October proposed to the WTO to just waiver the patent for these vaccines so they can produce it for themselves. They said, fine, if you can't give it through COVAX to us, okay. If you can't, share it equitably, fine. Let us make it for ourselves. And the countries voted. And Switzerland said no. The EU said no.
Why are you acting Switzerland?
The UK said no. Hey,
Everybody
why are you guys
blind.
defending your countries? Let it go.
I didn't defend them. I'm just like, why them?
I don't know. Speak to them. Speak to Alan Berset. Me, it's not me that said it.
You know what,
mhm.
as you're speaking like this, yeah, I feel like going directly or knocking on the doors. If I'm to go at
Yes.
somebody's or knock on somebody's door, who should I go? Whose fault is it? Who should we hold accountable?
That's crazy. What a question.
That's my question.
A question. That's a great question. Because that's why I like you're asking all these countries true, but you've also pointed the fact that you're acting organizations that can also be behind all of these different things, like Billy,
Billiam,
Bill, you know, Billy boy, you know,
Billy
you know
G.
who you are. But then it's like who. I don't know. It's hard to say
who do you ask? But that's why this was such a mess, is because it's so many structures, like systematic structures at all levels. And so when I say at all levels, at organizational levels, for example, in the WTO, like the World Trade Organization, why do these countries have so much power to basically veto another country's request to make life-saving vaccines for themselves? Why are these countries, like the governments, the people that decide, why are they, acting with so much self-interest? And essentially, Jocelyn, you were saying, not only self-interest, but by not allowing these countries to make their own vaccines, they're prolonging the pandemic that will eventually affect them anyway.
And and my question is, what is it about them making their own vaccines stop you from progressing in your healthcare system? What is it about them? Why would you say no to that?
Yeah, it goes back to profits. But when you really think about it, like the pandemic already makes them lose so much money, but it's like intellectual property. It's just like, okay, we came up with this idea, so we're not going to share it. This is our money. But prioritizing that in a public health emergency makes no sense to me.
My question is more towards like, you know how South Africa, you said South Africa, what was the other country?
And India.
And India.
Botswana as well. Yeah.
Yeah, you know how they requested that, okay, give us the formula, waiver the patent, and the United Kingdom and the Switzerland and the US.
And many other countries.
And they said no. I'm saying, why are these countries saying no? What's the reason?
Because to me, okay, just based on general, I don't know what dealings they have, exactly, but I would imagine it's a situation of, obviously pharmaceutical companies have a lot of power. Like they take up a huge chunk of like economy, industry, business, that kind of thing. So they probably have a lot of say and a lot of in with like different governments. So if I'm here as like, I don't know, this is the process that happens sometimes with these meetings, right? Where it's like Swiss delegation is going there for a COVAX meeting to represent the interests of Switzerland. Me knowing this as a pharmaceutical company, I'll send someone to talk to the delegation of Switzerland and be like, you cannot let that patent be waived.
Exactly.
You cannot let my patent get waived. Otherwise, ABCD or whatever, they can lobby like that. And so now the delegation of Switzerland can be influenced. They can be influenced in that way, or they can align with the pharmaceutical companies as well in that kind of like position, and therefore that's how you can get to, I think, to me.
No, exactly, because these countries, you have to remember, have like really big pharmaceutical companies that like Switzerland has multiple, the US definitely has multiple, and they make up a big part of the economy. I mean, they make the country money, they have power. And so, and you see it, I mean, in Switzerland, like a little off topic, but you see it in terms of tobacco, like, the WHO hates tobacco framework convention and everything. But Switzerland is like one of the few countries that actually hasn't accepted it, even if the WHO is here, because they have such the tobacco industry has such a hold on the Swiss government. So like, it is not surprising the pharmaceutical company would also do the same.
That's an interesting point.
They're also protecting their own interest as like private companies. And because there's such a huge industry, I think they can do that with the government as well. Especially like in the US, I know this whole issue of lobbying, like private companies lobbying with the government, it's a big thing.
I think linking back in relation to how exactly this vaccine inequality thing ended up becoming so concerning, particularly because with when countries like Uruguay, I remember reading a paper around countries like Uruguay when I think the WHO member states ambassador for Uruguay requested the vaccines through COVAX, and people were not responding. They were not responding to our calls. They were not responding to her messages. They were not responding to anything. And I think there were different ambassadors that also had similar issues of like, oh, we tried contacting them, but they're giving us excuses. They're telling us all types of yeses, and they're turning us around the bush. So I think, yeah, that adds up to it as well.
No, exactly.
That is why I also come back to the point of like, yeah, I do appreciate that. For example, you see this where South Africa, Botswana, India, they came together and actually proposed a solution in terms of like, this is exactly what we need in order to actually like solve the problem that we're seeing here with the vaccines and getting access to the vaccines. And yet they still come back with like, no, we don't like that.
We don't like that.
What you want and what you need, no, we don't want that.
And it's so crazy because every day we claim vaccine equity. Do you know how many times I've gone to vaccine equity conferences, vaccine equity talks, vaccine equity, all these big international organizations, they always run these things. But look at what we're going through today. I would have thought that, okay, maybe that was in the past, but we've seen it in this pandemic. This pandemic has revealed, exposed the fact that it still exists and it is predominant in this society.
No, exactly. I think a pandemic has revealed so many cracks in global health. And in terms of this, like, it really has revealed how the structure, like the problems in the structures of like where a lot of the decision making is in a certain group of countries' hands, and then that eventually ultimately affects the rest of the world. And I mean, as a result, I know I used, because the examples of like India and South Africa specifically going to ask for these patents, because what happened, the waivers in the patents, because what happened after was the variants. The variants happened. So allegedly the Omicron is from Southern Africa, Delta is from India. And of course, the governments just respond by banning the countries and closing their borders. Again, creating, more inequalities, more problems. And it's like something that could have been avoided if there was proper vaccine coverage in these countries, if they were able to produce it themselves. And so ultimately, did closing the borders even work? Because I had Omicron last week.
Yeah, did closing the borders even work? And it's like you're saying, we are trying to avoid the situation of like, okay, we're asking to manufacture these vaccines in our home countries. We avoid the whole thing with the cold chain supply, where you have to figure out all these logistics to ship things to us, And then on top of that, you introduce travel bans, which is now just going to affect all of those different things again. So it's very much, I just don't understand the line of thinking. Like on paper, what you are wanting to do and what you say you want to do and achieve and the targets you have set, great, but then the actions are not matching. I don't know. I feel like I'm telling someone off of like, do you realize that what you're saying, your actions are not matching? It's not matching.
That's what I find myself doing when I look at this often. I'm like, yeah, you had great intentions, but like, are you not seeing it's not going to work? It is not matching, and there's no accountability system. If you say, okay, we're going to miss our goal, okay, and what are you going to do to fix it?
Yeah, I think that just brings back that whole idea behind the interconnectedness in global health. You can have a great idea, you can have a great initiative, but it goes to show how much power and political will is required when it comes to bringing these incentives into action. And yeah, this COVAX example has brought that to light. And I mean, now what can we do? Like, what can we actually, I don't know. That's why I keep going back to
a tangible thing.
Who can we hold accountable, and how do we move forward? Because it's okay, it's enough to say that yes, there's vaccine inequity. Yes, the rich countries have all the vaccines, the poor countries get the remains. But who do we who do we come for? Who do we attack? Or let's say
everybody.
That's how I say everybody. Even these governments of countries that are struggling to get to that like higher level of like vaccine coverage, I would hold those governments accountable too, because it's like, yeah, it's not necessarily the responsibility of other countries to ensure you get full coverage.
Absolutely,
There
yeah.
are things you can do in your own country to have ensured that, for example, you have enough health spending and coverage that you can invest into research and development, that you can invest into local pharmaceutical companies that will be able to look into these things. But you haven't done that. You have made the money disappear in some ways, allegedly.
Allegedly.
That's all I'll say.
Allegedly. Do not come for us. Allegedly.
Now, these governments, you know who you are. If it applies, it applies.
Even Dr. Tedros. I remember him saying that that countries should maybe, hold back on getting the third dose, screaming to get the third dose. He recommended it, but no.
They said, sorry, I can't read or hear.
It doesn't make any sense, because no matter how good your country is doing, we live in a world where there is globalization. No group can be left behind. People are traveling left and right. Even if the United Kingdom right now is doing amazing, no matter how great you think you're doing, if somebody comes from, I don't know, France or Australia with a new strain and they're not vaccinated as required, then you go back to square one. And then all your efforts are dismissed. And then even because I know I know you high income countries, you rely on low and middle income countries for a lot of your products, of your materials. So if their economy is not good, yours is not good as well.
Well, there's a lot to say about that, but no, it's true.
Yeah.
And I think what irks me about all of this is like, even after all of this vaccine hoarding and everything, it's still projected that over 1 billion doses will go unused at the end of this year. So it's like they're even throwing it away.
So that is like a potential like 500 million full doses. Like, wow.
Not only is that a waste of resources, but what?
Exactly.
We're talking about, we don't have the finance, we don't have funding, we don't have this, we're shortage of equipment, shortage of everything, and we're wasting when it could have gone to people that needed, vulnerable groups that needed more.
Deaths that could have been prevented. And
that could have been prevented.
No, yeah, exactly. It's a bit crazy to me, because I mean, if you remember when these countries purchased the vaccines, it was even before they had approved it that they had ordered doses. So I remember Switzerland had purchased, like some Moderna, some Pfizer, some AstraZeneca, and then in the end they decided they're not even going to approve AstraZeneca anymore. And then that's when they decided, okay, maybe we're going to donate it to other countries. We'll do kindness now.
How do you take action before deciding? Like, how do you say that, I'm going to collect everything and then decide later?
Exactly. It just became like a scramble. It became a scramble.
Yeah.
And I mean, and this is all in context of like when vaccines were even being brought up at the beginning, the French doctor was saying, let's test it in Africans. They're the ones that are going to need it the most. And then now everyone is like, Africa, what? They don't need it. What vaccine? Who them?
This is where I like completely 100% agree with you on the whole like neo-colonial structure within which we continue to see. We see the same thing recurring, and it's just like, especially like what you said, where at the beginning a lot of like the rhetoric and the way journalists and scientists, all these people were talking, it was this whole classic idea of like, Africa is just like the white man's burden, and we will have to deal with Africa or something, or some of these more lower income countries, and we have to save them. Then they drafted their whole COVAX thing, but it's again, like you said, it has to be on their own terms.
Exactly. And it ultimately comes back to this, like they have the monopoly on health. And then it ends up being, aid-based global health, so that it ends up just being us hoping and praying on the kindness of countries to have vaccines instead of actually being self-reliant.
Exactly.
And I ultimately have problems with the whole structure.
Yeah. And then even when you want to rely on their aid and all these different things, it comes with conditions, number one.
Yeah.
Number two, they're not even delivering on it.
They're not delivering. And also they use it to get public public attention. They use it.
Yes, they do.
So benevolent. We're gifting.
The number of tweets I will see. The UK donates 1 million vaccines to Ethiopia. Ethiopia has 100 million people. What are we going to do with your like 3 cents? Like keep it. It's just exactly, like it really just becomes so hypocritical, and everyone wants to talk about like decolonize global health, decolonize, but like people need to understand you literally have to uproot the system and throw it away and start again, because this system at the end of the day just continues to create a power imbalance that we keep seeing.
There clearly is a power. It's very clear there's one.
So
and it's again like we touched on in our what was the title of the episode about like universal health coverage, where we talk about equity
equity
health, where again it's about like you cannot just say, okay, what we need to do for all the countries is the same thing, distribute the vaccines in the same way or whatever it may be. It's again like we talked about, like you need to like consider the context of each country. You need to be able to actually distribute in a way that makes sense. It may not be that countries like, let's say South Africa, for example, where we know they have the capacity to actually manufacture some of these themselves. They don't necessarily need these vaccines donated as like the food, you know, the thing, the way like the doses. Maybe it's again about giving that patent, giving the recipe, or I don't know, sharing. I know, for example, I don't know if you guys know, like for Coca-Cola, like they don't share the recipe with everyone. They give like a concentrated amount, and then in the country where you know they finish manufacturing, they just like add water or something to complete it,
and then they like make
they don't get the full recipe, you know what I mean? But it's just kind of like that kind of like meet somewhere in
some kind of cooperation,
you know. And then maybe there are countries where it's like, okay, these ones is best to just like deliver them as quickly as possible, vaccine, you know.
And then I like what you said about the whole equity, the equity bit, because in terms of health, when we want to promote health equity and we want to make sure that nobody is left behind, and that is a very, very, I don't know, important. It's important, but it should be the number one priority, because what's the best way for us to use our resources and produce the best results? If you have these number of vaccines and you're distributing it only to the high income countries that are more likely to be well off, then you're not making the best use of your resources. You're not. So going back to that whole horizontal vertical equity idea of making sure that healthcare and healthcare services, including vaccine distribution, it is given on a needs basis, the people that need it most. So if you've already had you've been able to deploy 2 doses, you've had that's fine. Now the countries that only have a single dose, the countries that have also have a high aging population, but they don't have those doses, countries that have also tackling other pandemics, tackling other epidemics, like South Africa. They're dealing with HIV, dealing with TB, dealing with so many things at the same time. Now, on top of that, with COVID, and they're gonna ask you to waive your patents, and you're saying no. Come on now.
Exactly. No, exactly. And that's where like I hate aid-based global health, like making them like, what is it, putting the decision in one country's hand or like a couple of countries, and making others reliant on it. That's ultimately the system, and I hate it. And it's not only in the vaccine that you see it. I mean, you know, in the early 2000s, it was with malaria, where like so many organizations, again, I don't know at William, but William and his friends, they, you know, like their solution was nets. Now nets are great for malaria, but they were just dumping them into the countries. They were just donating nets, but the countries themselves can make nets. And what it was doing was those countries, the companies that were making nets in those countries were losing money because nets were just being dumped. So they were even messing up the country's economy in the name of we'll help you in health. Like, let countries be self-reliant, especially, like, I'm not even saying waive patents for all drugs, like forget intellectual property, doesn't matter. That's not what I'm saying. When there are public health emergencies, though, when there are pandemics, when there are people's lives at risk, sometimes put money aside, sometimes think ethically, think ethics, I don't know.
But it's for me that yeah, it's also the case that here thinking ethically and thinking in the way that's gonna be more in a much more benevolent way, going towards the altruistic route will benefit you in the long term, even economically. So it's even a case like you can make a case
Exactly.
here in that sense of like it's not like we're telling you to give away like sacrifice so much. Yes, there's a bit of sacrifice associated, but it's so that you can actually
It's
fully benefit.
it's also gonna benefit
It's
you.
also gonna benefit you.
And also it goes, I think I'm I'm kind of thinking back. I'm trying to think about like what the high income countries are trying to achieve here.
Yeah.
They
Mhm.
want the profits. They
Yes.
want the what do you call it? The sauce. They want to say that yes, we're
They
doing
want the
well.
clout,
We're
the
well
buzz.
off. We're the West.
Mhm.
We're well off.
Uh-huh.
And everywhere the statistic that I think for every $1 of vaccine dose sold in a low income country, $4 of it is made in the high income country. So even if they're selling their vaccines or giving the vaccines away, they're making that profit back.
Mm.
They're making it back. And it goes to show that like a lot of these countries will, I don't know how it's, I'm very impressed, they'll find different strategies to say, okay, we will find the best way to still take advantage of you, still profit from you, and then donate you. We'll take from you and then donate
You
it
know,
back to you.
my friend said, like, we were like, I don't like referring to these countries as low high income countries. What do we call them? The global north. And she was talking about like, let's call them the exploiter countries, because that's what they are. And like, honestly, that's what it sounded like to me. I think I'm going to start saying exploiter and exploited, because
Exploited.
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
what it's looking like.
Yeah.
No, exactly. No, I think we said what we needed to say. Are there any burning things you want to add to the globies? Who you want to? Jocelyn has something.
Final thing. This is more for globies, though.
Final
Less for
thoughts.
countries.
Yeah, exactly.
I
Anything
would
for the
like to
globies.
address the misconception that the global south doesn't want vaccines. We never said we don't want vaccines. We have highlighted in this episode that COVAX was the initial incentive, but we have seen that there clearly is a disparity. And most of the time when vaccines are being given to us, they're leftovers.
Mhm.
The reason
The almost
why
expired ones.
exactly. And the reason why some countries in Africa haven't, I'm thinking about Tanzania as well, have been a bit reluctant and been a bit dismissive towards getting vaccines. It's not because they don't want it, it's because they've seen how we're being treated. They don't trust high income countries when it comes to handling vaccine distribution. So you can't say that. I don't want to hear people saying that, oh, low income black people, low income countries, black and my ethnic minorities, they don't want vaccines. Please, let's
exactly
put that myth away.
I agree, because I remember I was making a presentation like in my global health class about COVID vaccines in Ethiopia, and the percentage of vaccinated people was so low. I think it was 0.5% at the time. And so a classmate asked me, she was like, oh, is it because there's like such low acceptance of the vaccine? And I was like, girl, no, it's because there's no vaccine. I said, like, and I remember because I was speaking to my grandfather and I was like, oh, like, have you guys heard anything? And they're like, no, we've given up on the vaccine. There's no vaccine. Like,
there's no vaccine.
It's not because people don't want it. Like, it is not offered. It's just something they've given up on.
Don't give us your leftovers.
Don't give us leftovers. And also for me, I think as I was also speaking to some people, especially like in Zimbabwe, it was the idea of like, we also want the same vaccines that you are distributing amongst each other. Don't just give us the less effective ones.
The one you don't want that much.
The one you don't want that much. We want the same ones, equal treatment.
And also, whilst I understand that in a lot of low income countries, they don't have they sometimes don't have the capacity to store some of these vaccines. So you would need, I think $20,000 worth of refrigeration. I'm losing my voice. Refrigeration. So in that case, yes, like they would, some certain vaccines are more suitable for low income countries. Yeah, that's what
there's no denying that.
There's no denying that. We're not saying that, oh, everyone gets the same vaccine. It's not about saying everybody get vaccines. No, it's about understanding the needs of the populations. Understanding that, okay, this population, they can afford this. No, they can't. Yes, they can. Okay, we'll distribute Pfizer in this country, we'll distribute Moderna in this country. And that's on a needs basis, not on a we don't want it anymore, you can have an basis.
Yeah. And
Yep.
even in this assessment of what is needed, involve the country itself. Just involve them.
This, stop coming with your own solution and being like, this is how you should do it.
Exactly.
Who did God leave you in charge of earth? It don't even make sense. No, sometimes they act like it.
Delegate you? We delegated.
Yeah.
They were delegated. They said you guys are in charge. Like, no.
Exactly. Like, just cooperate. Don't make it seem like this whole thing of you are here at the top and you just pass down your things down here to everyone else at the bottom. Like, actually make it seem like it's a collaboration. At least make an effort.
I'm tired of this whole global north, global south thing.
Yeah.
And
exploiter, exploited.
Exploiter, exploiter. We really need to come together. And this is not saying this in an inclusivity way of, oh, let's involve you here and there. No, like really and truly putting all collaborating efforts together, having that multidisciplinary experts.
Yes.
We have bright minds both in the global north and
exactly.
The global
like there's ways you can benefit too. Like, it's not everyday global north coming to the global south and saying, look at our ideas, these are great, this is what you should implement. Like, an exchange will benefit everyone. Cooperation will benefit everyone.
Then definitely my message to our government is like, just invest more in health, invest more in our local researchers, our local development process, because we have cases where I swear in the team of people who are working for Pfizer who are able to like help develop that vaccine, there was a Zimbabwean guy who was there. A lot of our own talent is being stolen, and they go anyway to work in the exploiter countries, right? And then it's like, so part of it is the fault in the terms that there's no environment for us to like do the research and development for ourselves.
I agree. But I think I'm glad we're talking about this, and like I hope the Globies continue to kind of like maintain this conversation, because also just being aware that this inequality exists, because I don't hear people talking too much about it outside of global health, that like literally half of the majority of the world just does not have access to these vaccines, and the same structure exists in every other kind of tool that is used in global health. And to wrap it up, I just want to finish off with a quote that describes how I feel about this. Again, we've been seeing Dr. Tedros Adhanom a lot today recently, but this is something he said, and it really resonated with me, because he said, "I will not stay silent when the companies and countries that control the global supply of vaccines think the world's poor should be satisfied with leftovers." And it's the leftovers for me.
Say it louder for the people in the back. Say it louder for the people in the back. One more time.
They said, "I will not be satisfied with leftovers," because that's what it is right now. It has become them donating leftovers. So just keep that all in mind. And thank you so much for listening to the World Health Investigation Podcast. Today was our last episode. How do you guys feel? It's not our last episode. We're just taking a break. We're taking a break.
We'll be back.
We promise we'll actually be back.
We'll be back. Better, stronger, funnier.
We actually have so many like topic ideas.
Y'all don't even know.
And we keep telling you we're gonna do part 2s to some of these things.
There'll be part 2s, part 3s. And if there are any burning topics that you want us to tackle,
suggest it to us.
We'll plug you. We're coming.
Absolutely.
We want to make sure that no one is left behind. Nobody.
Yes. This is a conversation. You need to talk back to us too. We want to know.
Exactly.
We want to know how you feel.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So thank you so much for listening to our last episode for season 1. My name is Loza.
I'm Jocelyn.
And I'm Edna.
Thank you so much for listening to the World Health Investigation Podcast. Do you want to plug our socials one last time, Ms. Joyceline, before we go?
Yes. Before we go, because we'll be back. Don't worry. Please follow us on Instagram at WHI_podcast, Twitter at WHI_podcast. We also have a Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn house at World Health Investigation. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Subscribe right now.
Follow our Spotify.
Follow our
Apple
Spotify.
Podcasts.
Download. Listen. You are helping. If you help us, we're gonna come back with better, and more quality content.
If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, leave us a review.
Leave us
A nice one.
5 stars.
5
star. Don't be shy.
Review.
Don't be shy. Just
Don't
click
be
it.
shy.
Just
Don't be
click
shy.
it.
Don't be shy. And also, if you really have some burning topics that you want us to discuss, feel free to email us. We have an email currently called worldhealthinvestigation@gmail.com. So if you have any particular queries, feel free to go on our website as well and contact us.
Yeah. Or you can DM us.
Or DM us. Yeah.
Whatever's easy. Whatever's easy. Perfect. Thank you so much. And goodbye for now.
Bye.
Bye.
See you next season.